What is up, everybody? It is Adrian back with another forecast, and I know it has been a while again since my last upload. To be honest, guys, for the past 2 years, as you guys can tell with my inconsistent schedule, I've really kind of been on and off about kind of my passion for weather and stuff. But as I go into college in the next few months, and I want to continue, obviously, still with atmospheric science and meteorology, possibly. I was just thinking, might as well get back into the weather uploads, increase that passion before I go into college. And obviously, I wanted to keep posting for you guys, so I was like, might as well just go ahead and do it now. So I know it's been a long time, but hope you guys are still here. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the potential for more severe weather uh, in the upper plains and in Tornado Alley for the next few days, specifically looking at Tuesday, the April 30th, and then looking at the next day, which is Wednesday for May 5th. So those are 2 days that we are looking for that, as of now, have a semi-favorable severe weather set up for some potential continuation of severe weather like we saw yesterday, obviously yesterday. And then the day before, I obviously wasn't uploading. But of course, as you guys know, there was an extremely significant severe weather outbreak. Um, and although this won't be to that extent, there is again a continuation of potential severe weather in areas that were affected by the outbreak yesterday and the day before that, which is why I'm kind of making this upload for this. So let's go ahead and get into the video. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is the day 3 severe weather outlook for April 30th. And as of now, we have a slight risk for portions of Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Iowa, and right there on the Minnesota border, with the extremely large marginal risk stretching down from portions of Texas all the way up towards, again, Minnesota, South Dakota, and nearly Wisconsin. So this flight risk is rather extensive, with including areas like Kansas City, Omaha, Lincoln, Kansas City, and just a large area in those for the majority of west central Iowa as well. And then that margin includes areas like Oklahoma City again, and that western and southern area that got hit extremely hard yesterday, all the way up towards nearly Minneapolis and Twin Cities. And including again a large portion of the central United States. So the slight risk, again, the probability is a 15% chance. We are going to see whether that is for wind, hail, and stuff tomorrow once it gets to day 2. But based on the overall severe weather setup, it looks like it's going to be mainly a wind um, dominant system with a setup as of now. Again, that can change, and this video will be rather short because, again, it's still pretty far out, so I don't want to get too excessive into the details. But it looks like as of now, the slight risk is definitely for sure dominantly for the wind. And again, there is a decent setup for tornadoes and some hail, but for now it looks for the majority part to be wind dominant. As of now, again, that can change. And then the day 4, we actually have a 15% chance already, which is again why I'm looking at a multi-day potential continuing into the middle part of next week for Wednesday. And that 15% chance, and again, is including areas that it's a little bit more west compared to the hardest hit areas. But again, this is including, for the most part, a very similar area that got hit extremely hard last night. And this includes a pretty large area, considering it is day 4. It is a pretty large 15% chance, including areas like Wichita, Manhattan, Hutchinson, and Emporia, Kansas. So again, it includes more of those rural areas, and includes close to like Lawton, Oklahoma, and stuff like that. We will see if it will continue to spread as we get towards day 3 and again day 2 and day 1. With there already being a 15% chance this far out, there is a high likelihood and confidence from the SPC for a potential severe weather outbreak here. Obviously, we're not looking at towards the extent of yesterday, but again, hitting the similar areas. So with how recent it was, I thought I would cover it. Again, we're not going to get into crazy detail with this because it didn't. Again, it is 4 days out, and we know how things change. But as of now, we're looking at the potential for April 30th and May 1st having some severe weather across similar areas I got hit yesterday. So let's go ahead and look at now generally the setup that we have in the upper atmosphere when it comes to the upper dynamics in the 500 millibar. So this is the latest 18Z GFS. And my computer's a little slow, so just bear with me here. So let's go. This is obviously today what we're seeing here on the 28th. Let's see how long it takes for us. There we go. It takes a little bit. My computer, since it hasn't really run like this in a while, it's going to be a little bit slow here. So let's go ahead and get towards Tuesday. So it's actually going to be a rather, to start, it's going to be a little bit on the weaker side when it comes to the upper 500 millibar upper level low. So if we go towards 21Z, if it lets me here, I don't know why it's being so annoying. If we go to like around 18Z, again, the main area we're looking at for is areas around here in like Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, and ready by 18Z. Again, we're not having the really strongest winds. That's going to be one of the big issues when it comes to tornadoes, is that we're not going to have the strong upper level shear and as well veering as we go up in the atmosphere. So again, we're not really going to have a crazy tornado setup. It's going to be predominantly wind. Again, 46 knots, 37 knots, maybe 45 knots in some areas. But as you can tell, for the most part, this really upper level low and trough is for the most part quite zonal. And a big part of that is as we continue on and Tuesday and eventually Wednesday, there's actually going to be a strong ridge in the southeast. It's going to bring really a hot temperature. So it's going to kind of really affect like the really like meridional flow of the trough. And but again, you still have again some southwesterly winds coming within the area of Nebraska. So again, that's where you probably want to watch out for some tornadoes by 21Z. If it, I don't know, yeah, like I said, my computer would be a little slow. By 21Z, you start to see these winds start to pick up a little bit more, getting up to around maybe 50 knots now in some regions of South Dakota, maybe 60-ish knots. But when we're really looking at that really warm sector air, it's going to be more down here towards Kansas and Missouri, where again has a little bit on the lower side when it comes to the upper level winds, around 40 to 50 knots really in these areas, and somewhat south westerly. But that's going to be really, this is going to be the time frame early on is where we're going to really be. If you want tornadoes, that's going to be the time frame. But once you get towards now like 0Z and then a little bit after 0Z, then the winds start to become predominantly zonal, and that's where that wind threat will really kind of start to carry on there. Again, you're going to be seeing really zonal winds, like basically due west. But that's again a little bit ahead of that is where you start to see those southwesterly still. Again, you had that shortwave trough right here. So really ahead of that is where you're going to be seeing that main really just stretching outflow. So again, that's where, again, maybe a little bit Iowa there is where you maybe want to see some tornado threats. But for the most part, again, it will be like when you look at the upper dynamics, it really looks like more of a huge wind threat. And then once you go overnight, not only will the little weak cold front push in with those cold temperatures, again, outflowing storms, probably just going to be seeing a line of storms with really heavy winds and maybe an overnight tornado or two kind of embedded in there. You're really not going to see a huge threat when it comes to tornadoes. That's going to be the 30th. But if we go now towards the day 4, which is going to be on May 1st, if I can get to that. Yeah, my computer's super slow. As we get to May 1st, I hate how slow my computer is being right now. Very, very annoying. All right, as we get now towards May 1st. Here we go. So May 1st, again, you're not going to be seeing a super duper strong setup when it comes to like the upper level winds and like the meridional flow and like super duper strong upper level winds and sure like that. We're not going to be seeing like that like we saw yesterday. You go to 21Z, you're going to be seeing really good, like when you look at the actual like direction of the jet stream, it actually is a little bit better than day 3. You see really good southwesterly winds here, but again, really weak, 35 knots, 40 knots in some areas. And like I said, here's that you can see that really strong ridge really kind of enforcing, kind of like what you see is more of like a shear type setup here or a strong wind type setup where it's going really like southwesterly, directly basically northeast. That's where again you're gonna be seeing that predominantly wind threat coming in. But as we go now to 0Z here, if it loads for us, you're going to be seeing some spots in Kansas. Again, that we're highlighting that 15% with a little bit more towards 45 knots now. Again, really not a huge, like, significant setup right now. It's still 4 days out, but that's still really good. This is not a terrible setup for some severe weather. Again, SPC again has a 15% chance 4 days out, and it's not a really pretty setup, obviously, because again that ridge really affects the way that this upper level low is really developing. Again, for the most part, it actually looks positively tilted rather than negatively tilted. But again, just looking at the overall wind setup and the 500 millibar high, it's looking like a decent setup. It's obviously not looking crazy, but again, it's 4 days out and it does have the attention of the SPC. Let's go ahead and look at the 850 millibars really quickly here. So this is actually going to be a really big factor in day 4 as of what I've seen so far. We'll get into that in a little bit, but let's go ahead and get in towards day 3, which is the 30th. So again, by 18Z, this is exactly why you're going to be seeing kind of your risk rather down here. I know you have your stronger winds up here with 500 millibar. That's because it's a lot closer to the actual upper level low itself. But right here, that's where we're going to be seeing a lot of your moisture coming in from this 850 millibar flow, bringing in southerly winds from the Gulf of Mexico. And that is actually 43 knots, 45 knots, not terrible at all. That's actually one of the reasons why it's a slight risk, is because the 850 millibar flow is actually really good for 3 days out, actually 42 knots. And this is going to actually bring in a lot of that moisture, a lot of that humidity, a lot of that heat, and just really good ingredients in the surface for severe weather. And again, since it is due south, we are going to be seeing kind of that difference in the wind vector. So again, that's where we will be seeing possibly a threat for some isolated tornadoes by 21Z. A lot better, a lot more widespread. And this is basically exactly where the slight risk is, like Iowa, eastern Nebraska, parts of Kansas and Missouri right there. This is exactly why you have your slight risk here. That's going to be seeing your, again, some good discrete storms popping up early on. As we go overnight, obviously they will basically be cold pooled and turned into a linear storm with rather strong winds. And these storms will, of course, have really strong winds. But again, the main part of this system is, again, like the shearing. It really isn't that good. These storms with the really weak shearing will start to stack on each other pretty early on. So again, that's where we're gonna have a really small time frame for tornadoes, and then by 0Z and 03Z, again, you can really see that the cold air really pushing with the wet vectors, and then that's where we're gonna be really seeing like your stronger winds coming in here as the storms stack on each other. But other than that, again, a decent setup. There is a decent time frame between around 18Z to just before 0Z where we could see some isolated tornadoes. I don't see as of now, I don't see a huge promise for overnight tornadoes. There could be 1 or 2 occasionally embedded overnight, but really it's not like eye-popping right now. Let's go ahead and go now towards May 1st, 21Z. It actually is going to be starting off a little bit on the weaker side. By 21Z, you're having around 30-ish knots, 32 knots, but as you get now towards 0Z, now you start to see parts across western Oklahoma there, which we're highlighting that 15% chance, with now getting 52 knots, 60 knots, more generally 50 knots. So it starts to actually really increase, and that's going to really help bring in that moisture. So it's going to be more of an evening to overnight threat, a little bit more of the opposite towards day 3. So this is where we're going to be seeing, again, with the downside being the really weak 500 millibar, but the 850 millibar being rather strong, we are still seeing an isolated tornado threat. So really 21Z to around just before around 0Z, that's where we're going to be seeing that area for, again, that's where you'll be seeing your discrete or chance for discrete storms begin before that cold air moves in and before they start to kind of cool out and get pulled out, and then basically become more of a wind threat here. Again, the setups aren't, again, like eye-popping or crazy, but again, the setup's there. It's a really good setup. You have that cold air coming from the west. You have that jet stream and really warm and humid air coming from the Gulf. You have a decent Upper level low, not the strongest, obviously, because again, for the most part, it really isn't negatively tilted or extremely strong or meridional where you're having really strong kind of outflow and inflow. You're going to really have, for the most part, rather zonal. But then the 850 millibar, again, it really helps bring in kind of that difference in wind vectors, and it really helps with that, for the most part, lower level shear, which again is important. But you really want to have the support with upper level shear too to really help those storms really grow and separate from each other, keeping it rather discreet. But again, it isn't the best setup, but again, the setup does look decent enough, especially with how far out it is. Let's go ahead and go out now towards April 30th, and by 18Z again with that 850 millibar, really bringing in those warm temperatures from the Gulf and South. I'm going to be seeing in the area we're really watching out for mid to upper 70s, really good temperatures. And then as you go to 0Z, if it take or 21Z, sorry, you're going to be seeing a little bit more closer to now getting some closer to some 80s. Really good, or rather decent warm sector here. Again, we'll look at the dew points in a little bit, but again, really good temperature. So the temperatures are good, and then you can see by 0Z already that cold air is already starting to really form. Like you go from really 68 to now 56, so you can kind of see that little minor cold front there. And that's going to be the reason why the tornado threat really won't be long lasting or really severe, is because by the time we get to around 0Z, it starts to really like kind of squall out really with that cold air really pushing in. Because it is zonal for the most part, the low pressure will be moving pretty fast, so it'll be a really short event. But again, if it does pan out an hour or two, we could have some tornadoes, rather discrete tornadoes, and then an overnight threat with squalls and stuff. So this would be really, for the most part, wind dominated. But again, really good temperatures there supported, and that warm sector. But again, by the 3Z, then it'll really get all cooled out, and that'll just really become just more of a wind threat, to be honest. By May 1st, again, that's going to be a really warm day, so we're going to be seeing a lot more instability here, and that's obviously going to increase tornado threat a lot more. We're not going to have to worry about what that midwestern cooler air is still in the picture here. The cold front really won't come into a lot later also, so typical more favorable tornado alley threat than the upper Midwest. Really hot temperature, so trust me, there's going to be a lot of instability. There is going to be a lot of just brewing temperatures and a lot of cape really developing by the time I get towards 21Z, with up lower 90s all across that 15% chance. And then by 0Z, again, so some parts in the upper 80s, lower 90s. So there's going to be a lot of instability and a lot of rising air with, again, like the low pressure and lower warm air advection and other factors helping rise. So there really shouldn't be a lot of cap also, but again, it's 4 days out, so we're not going to get into really specifics. But again, with temperatures like this, there really shouldn't be a lot of cap really keeping these storms from forming, basically. So again, really good temperatures for May 1st as well. A lot more support when it comes to like actual thermos. And then lastly, we look at the dew points here. We're not going to get into soundings or anything, because like I said, it's really far out, but just looking at the overall setup here. And then if we go to now April 30th, 18Z, or actually let's go to 21Z. April 30th, 21Z, again, dew points aren't going to be the best, because the upper level and lower levels aren't good together. Really, the lower levels are, like I said, pretty good, 40 notch or so. But again, that really isn't going to do it all by itself. We will still have lower 60s, maybe closer to Kansas. We'll even have some maybe mid to almost upper 60s in the dew points. So again, if you're really going to be watching for tornadoes for the early part of the day, it'll be towards Kansas and Missouri. And then as we get toward now 0Z, then we'll have a little bit more favorable, getting closer to Iowa and stuff. But like I said, since it is going to be pretty fast moving with the low pressure, there's going to be really short and specific area for tornadoes. Dew are going to be a little bit on the cooler side. So again, going to be like more of a wind threat for the most part. Let's go ahead and now go towards the May 1st, and you can see obviously closer to the coast and a stronger 850 millibar, a lot better dew points, a lot more favorable thermos, obviously a lot better for tornadoes. Going to be seeing 70s by 21Z, And obviously, we'll even spread out a little bit further more to Kansas. So I think we'll have a pretty large marginal risk for this day once we get towards day 3. By 0Z, you can just see the really strong or rather extensive warm sector. So really, again, those areas in Oklahoma, Texas, up towards Kansas, you guys are going to have some pretty favorable dew points. And again, with the temperatures, you're going to be seeing a lot of instability here. If there was a lot more shear, as it'll definitely be a lot more concerning for the setup wise. But with this thermos and the decent um, upper level dynamics and lower level dynamics, again, looks like a pretty solid setup here for May 1st. But again, as we get closer, there'll be a lot more details. And if I do have time to post, obviously I will try to before this actually takes place. But if not, hope you guys enjoyed the video. And of course, be sure to subscribe. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy your day.